going to start by playing around with and trying to make a fake Instagram clone. So we'll have this idea of, oh, this is off my phone. There we go. So we'll have this idea of this feed of stuff. We will not show ads because we're awesome. But we'll basically just like the scrolling timeline of pictures. I'm not going to do an infinite timeline. I'm just going to do like a preset amount of posts. But the basic idea will be to do something like this with maybe, tap on a post like this to get some details about the comments or something. At the very least, it'll probably show a caption. So while we're getting the basics of all of this built up, Clay over here, he's finding me some data and marking out some data. He's going to dump that to me in Slack. Yeah, we're going to need some icons, so we'll be able to look at using SF symbols, which is awesome. Let's see, what else are we going to be able to do? Yeah. We could maybe look at, okay, wow, everything already. Let's see what we got. Oh, because it hasn't finished downloading yet. There we go.
Got some DMs on the ground.
Okay. Photos. All right, these look properly Instagram-ish. Great. So we're going to start here in Xcode. I'm just going to create a new project. And I'm going to create an iOS. Let's just go with single view. Is that good? I'll say next. We'll say this is a CocoaHeads. And language Swift, user interface.
SwiftUI that's what I came here at.
Rinsta.
Okay, sure. Like SwiftUI.
Utagram. Okay.
Let's not get bogged down in unnecessary.
Yes. Okay, naming things. Let's talk about naming things. Okay, and I'll just save this on my desktop.
Best place to save it.
Yep. When I'm playing around with playgrounds, one of the things I like to do, and it's just something I want to see if it works, I'll just save the playground into /temp/tmp, and then I'll close it, and then it gets automatically deleted at some point in the future, and I don't end up with a bazillion playgrounds cluttering my computer. All right, so let's look at what we're going to need. We've got a basic post here. That is going to have this little user view up at the top with a little ellipsis. We've got the big ol' area for the picture itself. We got this bar of actions beneath it, and then maybe for some text underneath. What I'm going to actually do first is just copy all of those in. Clay, yes. Would you also work me up just like descriptions of these?
Sure.
Yeah, just some mock data. Okay. Now the thing that it's taken me a while to like kind of get with SwiftUI is like I'm typing stuff here and it's showing up in the preview, and what I have typed is not what is going to show up. And I think this is an important disconnect to me. We're really used to the idea of I'm instantiating a UI label and a UI label is showing up in the UI. That is not what SwiftUI is really about. SwiftUI is all about describing what the sorts of things you want in the UI, and then it's under the hood. There's a whole engine that's actually translating this into UI elements. So there is not necessarily a one-to-one correspondence between what you're typing and what's going to show up. A really good example of this is if you use something like a group view. in SwiftUI. This doesn't necessarily correspond to like a container view or anything in the actual built interface. It's just a way of describing some related views. SwiftUI is about describing what you want to show up, and SwiftUI takes care of how it actually gets there. Okay? And this is something that like we're so used to this imperative world of like, I've got a label. Now I'm going to tell it what font I want. Now I'm going to tell it what color I want. And now I'm going to tell it these other things. And we kind of need to flip that thinking a bit to say, instead of commanding this label to be a certain color, what we're going to say is like, I've got this thing, and it should have a foreground color. It has a foreground color. I'm not telling it to take a foreground color. It's a little bit of a subtle mind shift, but it's pretty important. So right here we're describing, we want some text to show up. Now when we create views and stuff, we're used to having to set like these layout constraints and these positionings and stuff, and there's none of that here. What I can do is I can describe, you know, I want a vertical stack or a V stack of some things, and look, it looks exactly the same. But I could say a text, and then I want another thing in this stack that says, "Hello, CocoaHeads," and I've said nothing about how these views are positioned relative to each other than I want them vertically stacked. Okay, I'm describing my interface and what I want it to do. There are some other things I can do, like I can describe a text, some text that has a particular color. So I can say I want it to have a foreground color of, say, red. And the interesting thing here is this is a color.red. Color is one of the new Swift types, or SwiftUI types. This is something that is like kind of been difficult for me. It's just like the massive surface area of this API that there is to learn. Like there is so many new types. So, but notice that this is a color.red, but I can also just say, and I want a color.red right down here, and boom, I've now got, wow, look, some red color as part of my vertical stack. This is really interesting because color itself in SwiftUI is also a view. It is something that can be seen, and that's what a view is in SwiftUI. This particular modifier explicitly wants a color view, but there are a whole bunch of modifiers on SwiftUI views that allow you to pass in almost any kind of view. For example, maybe instead of like having a color red down there, you can say I want an overlay, and here it says pass in any view, and I can say now I just want to overlay color.red, and now I've got a red view stacked on top of that text, because I've described I want red on top of this text. Okay? But it doesn't have to be a color, right? It could be another text. Like this, you know? Like, and there's no limit. Like to this text, I could have another overlay and say recursion is fun. And this is now just like text on top of text on top of text. This is a bad way to, here we go. Wrap that in text. This is not the greatest way to do vertically stacking view, or Z stacking views, but like it's to show that the fundamental protocol, the fundamental thing of SwiftUI is a protocol called view. View is very simple. The real thing that a view has is a body, okay? And it's just a way to describe what's inside this.
Dave,
Yes.
can you bump your font size? Would that work? Thank you.
So this var body, which we're going to see a lot of tonight because we're going to create a lot of custom views. This is like how you describe UI. It's this, you describe, you know, we're going to create like a custom avatar picture view. And it's going to have a body, and that's going to describe what does an avatar picture look like. There are a whole bunch of other things on this view. If you look over here in like the list of methods, these are all things that you can do to a view. You can explicitly position them within the parent. You can specify a layout priority if you want it to like start trying to size itself before or after its siblings. You can position things, add padding around it. You can do, here's that overlay we saw, and we can see this is a generic method. It wants a generic overlay type, and overlay just has to be another view. Okay, so this is how we could overlay a color and a text. You can overlay shapes, whatever. You can do effects. We can scale a view up or down, which we might see. We can do transformation, such as rotation, projection, and then for certain kinds of views, we've also got other things like, you know, modifying the font of stuff inside of this, or changing, you know, how text aligns if it wraps to multiple lines, and so on. Questions so far?
What app is that that you're using for ducks?
This is an absolutely amazing app called Dash. I highly recommend it. You get it from the website capelli.com. It does cost, I think it's like 20 bucks. But when you integrate Dash with your favorite launcher of choice, and it's got a lot of integration options, it can really just speed up looking for stuff. So I integrate it with Alfred. And this means that I can now start typing things, you know, like, hey, tell me about NS outline view, and I just get autocomplete stuff. And it's not just class names, but it also is, you know, is methods and properties as well. Very, very useful. Way faster than Xcode. All right, so let's start thinking about how we would describe a profile picture view. Clay, can you also find me a couple of fake profile pictures? I'm going to create a new file here, and I'm going to just say it's a SwiftUI view, and this is going to be a profile picture. And again, you know, we're going to start off with this basic text, but what do we really want? We want a rounded square image. So let's take that backwards. We want an image that's square and rounded. Okay? All right. So let's start with image. We want an image view, and we'll go with an image with a name. And for now, I'm going to choose photo 1. All right. So that's got us image. Now we need it to be square. How do we make a view be square?
Give it a frame.
What? I heard something? Aspect ratio. What is aspect ratio?
TV says 16 by 9.
Yeah, so the aspect ratio is basically a way of describing the dimensions of a view as a proportion of its width to its height. So if you've got an aspect ratio of 1 to 1, that means for every one width there is one height, which means it's square. So we can say we want an aspect ratio of, not content mode, aspect ratio of 1. Okay? Is that the right one? Aspect ratio. Oh, here we go. 1, and then I need to have a content mode, which is, do we want it to try and fit the longest dimension, in which case we might have letterboxing at the top or the bottom, or do we want it to fit the shortest dimension, in which case we might have cropping? I don't think we want extra blank space, so let's do that's going to be a fill content mode. All right, so we've got a square image now, but we can't really see it. It's too big. We need this image to be smaller. Okay, so this is a special modifier on images that just says resizable. And actually, I've got the wrong content mode. Here we go, fit. So we've got a square image, right? It does look a little squishy, I think.
I think you want aspect fit.
My S key on this keyboard is, no, it's only filler fit, so fit. I will definitely get weird double S's. Profiles, here we go.
You need to say resizable? Oh, you don't. Oh.
All right, we'll figure this out later. Okay, so we've got an image that's square. Here we go, resizable and clear. And we also need it to be a circle. There are a couple of different ways we could do this. Any suggestions for people who know?
CA layers.
No.
Corner radius.
Okay, so we could do something of like a corner radius, but this is going to want an explicit size. So I could say, corner radius of 20, and that's great. Like you can definitely see that there's that, but that doesn't necessarily make it a circle, right?
Yeah.
Can't you overlay it and cut it with the shape or something like that?
Okay, and I think maybe we could. Here we go. Okay, boom. Okay, so we're saying we've got this image, it's a square, and we're going to clip it, so cut out everything that does not fit inside this shape.
Then you can change the size of it.
Yeah, and now I can do things like, oh, I actually want it to have a frame, a width of like 20 and a height of 20 center, and now it's going to be like a really tiny thing. Let's do a bit bigger. 120. Oh, 120. There we go. And it's still a circle, right? So what we're doing here is we're describing, I want an image that's square and rounded. It fits inside a circle. And that is pretty much literally what we wrote. Okay? And we don't have to do any more this mucking with like CA layer and like resetting the corner radius every time the frame changes and stuff, because we're not commanding specific views what they should be doing. We are describing the overall effect that we want. Okay? So we've got this pretty nifty profile picture. But we don't always want photo 1, right? Maybe we want something else. So let's just make it take a UI image. Yeah, so we want the image to be like a parameter that we can use. It's like a constructor function, and then here in my preview temp data, I'm just going to create a UI image. Let's see, named, and we'll go with photo 2 so we can see that this is actually happening. And then here, instead of just explicitly calling in photo 1, I want the image constructor that just uses a UI image, and now it's that. So when this resumes here, it's now going to load course around. It's now going to load photo 2, and boom, there's photo 2. Okay, so I've now made it so that it can do multiple things. In fact, I can do other cool things down here in the previews. If I want multiple things previewing, I'll just wrap them inside of a VStack, just stack them all up. And I'll copy this. we'll say we've got 3 and 4 here as well. And this is just makes it pretty easy to show like what's going on and yeah, cool. We've got a profile picture. So if we go back and look here, we can now have Elton Brown's little profile picture. Questions?
Should we put a border on it?
You want a border on it? Okay. Let's describe a border. We want a border.
We make it pretty.
And the border is going to be a circle, I think. No. Oh, it's shape style. Okay. This is where me not knowing all of the API is.
We could also just.
Maybe you color it? You color that black?
I could have sworn that circle was not just a shape, but a shape style. Shape style. So what I did here is I look and I see that border needs something that is a shape style. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump to the declaration here of circle, and I'm just going to Command F, and this is like the entire fake header of SwiftUI. And I'm now just going to search for shape style, and I can see, okay, color is a shape style, so is foreground style, image paint. Here's some sort of generic method. Oh, here we go. Stroke border, but it's still going to want content. Okay, linear gradient, radial gradients, strokes, shape style, angular color. All right. The very least, what I know I can do is, well, let's just. I don't want to. Sure. Let's just try a border of color.red and width of 10 so we can see it. Okay, so the border is showing up on the square itself. Why?
That's very cold.
Right, so where do we want the border to actually show up? On the circle, right? Not on the image. And right now we're still describing the image itself.
Circle dot.
Yeah, so I mean, we could maybe try and do that and like, well, I don't think that's gonna work because the border modifies the circle to be a kind of view that's no longer a shape. But we don't, and this is where SwiftUI also gets kind of weird. The circle that defines the border is not necessarily the same border, the same circle that defines the shape.
Is there a different clip?
Is there? Let's see. This is the clip. No, just clipped. Go on clip. Okay. So what we can actually do here is we can overlay another circle. Okay. And we can say that this is a circle that has a border of red and a width of, say, 10.
Instead of doing border on that circle, if you do stroke, it will give it.
Cool.
And now you can just specify the color of your stroke and the line width.
right, so the content of the stroke is like what's inside the border, right? So maybe this could be colored out red
Yeah.
and aligned with 10. Boom. A little weird,
That's weird.
but kind of cool.
Well, so can we put that stroke on the clipping?
Could we put it?
It's not a.
I don't think so, because this is going to return a new kind of view that's not a shape. I'll try it,
Yeah, there, exactly.
but I think this will error out. It does. Yes.
So if I put padding on the body side of the VStack, I wonder if that'll create the surface just a little bit.
Yeah, so we could do something here of like, around all of these, give a padding of 10, and just move them apart. We could also, instead of doing that, do a larger space between the views on the VStack, maybe 20 more pronounced. Okay. All right, so we've got this. Let's start building our overall post view. And when we get to this post view, I want to take a little pause here and describe, there's this weird thing here called some view, okay? Do any of you know what's going on with some view here?
I know it's an opaque type.
It is an opaque return type. Yes. What does that mean?
It returns one of many different things, but they're all that particular type.
Kind of, but not quite.
That's close.
Well, return anything conforms to the protocol you're stating. But there's a thing about obscuring what comes back.
Yes. So if let's go back to this profile picture, and to illustrate what this is going to do, I'm going to say let I equals image and return I. Okay, and I'm going to do this because like even when I option click here, it still just says some view. But what I really want to do here is I'm going to print the type of I. And I'm going to hope that this gives me something in the console. Because what comes out in the console, maybe not, let's hop over to the simulator. What comes out in the console is really, really gross. Okay? And the point of some view is it does nothing for the compiler. Some view is entirely for us humans, us measly humans that don't want to type out everything that we're going to see here in the console in a second. It's a way for us to tell the compiler this method returns a concrete known type, but I don't want to type it out. Oh, and we actually need to like create one of these. Profile, picture, image, UI image, named photo 1, force unwrap, run again. Helps to actually, here we go. All right, so this is the type of our profile picture. Who wants to type this out as the return type of your var body? No? So we type some view instead. We know, like we can definitively say at compile time what this type will be, but some view just means we don't have to type it out. Yes?
I thought one of the restrictions of some view was that it had to return the same type every time. So you couldn't switch and say, now it's returning text, now it's returning the image.
Correct, because this is all being defined at compile time, right? And at compile time, it has to be a single thing. We might get a talk at some point about how you could be a little bit more dynamic. The basic idea is instead of dynamically choosing which view you're going to return, you wrap them in a group, and inside the group you choose. Because then it's a group of a tuple view, and it's the tuple view describes it can either be a view of type A or of type B, but that's still captured by the entire overall signature. But yeah, like I really don't want to type this out. And if you look back at like the Swift evolution stuff, you'll notice that the proposal for some view came from engineers who were working on SwiftUI before anybody knew that SwiftUI was a thing. And this is why, because they got really sick of typing this out, because this is what they were doing before they had some view. Is every time they changed, how foreground color or whatever worked, they were having to go through and change all of this, and it's super gross. So, but if we look at this, we can kind of see what's going on. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to copy this into TextEdit, a place where I know I can easily blow up the size of something. And I want to kind of like pick apart what's going on. So the very first thing is we've got a modified content view, and that inside it is going to have another modified content, and inside that, that's going to have another modified content, and inside that, more. And then here's our image with an aspect ratio layout. And then this is also going to have a clip effect right here, and then close that level, move this down to there. And what I'm doing here is just showing like how all of the generics work. And you can kind of start to pick apart what we've been doing, right? I've got
After color should be one more over, I think, right?
which one?
The one after color.
Yeah. No, that doesn't work instead. Thank you. So again, we can kind of work from the inside out. We've got an image, and it's been modified with a layout defining its aspect ratio. Right? That's this bit. And then that whole thing has been modified to have a clip of a circle, right? And then that whole thing has been modified with an overlay. This is the border, right? That is a shape, that is a stroke shape, that is a circle, that has a stroke color, right? And then all of this has been modified to have an explicit frame. And if we go back and we look at our profile picture, that's what we got, right? Got image, aspect ratio, clip with a circle, overlay with a circle with stroke red, explicit frame. Okay? But don't want to type it out, therefore some view. And I'll just delete that again. Okay, so let's talk about now our post view. What are the primary, oh, not that one, the primary parts of our post view?
This header above the image.
Yeah, we got this little header,
The image itself.
image itself,
Some bar of actions below.
bar of actions,
And then like a
texty stuff.
Comment
Okay.
field, comments.
Comments. We actually, the like stuff is technically its own field, so maybe we might decide to break that out. Let's start here. So we want things to stack in which orientation? Vertical, so we've got a V stack. And on the top, we're going to have a profile picture. We'll just start with UI image, name, photo 1. Okay, and then next, we're going to have, we're going vertically here.
Oh, you want the
Yeah, we'll get there in a second.
Big
Next thing, big giant picture. Image. Photo 1. Okay, next we're going to need some symbols or actions, and then we're going to need likes, and then we're going to need comments. Okay, so let's talk about this post header. I'm actually going to post header. Let's create the post header. So I'll create another SwiftUI view. I create SwiftUI views all the time. Everything's a custom view. Just because like when I've got something simple like a post header, it's easy for me to think about what's going on, right? It's just like single responsibility. Now post header is this bit up here. What do we have going on? Which direction are we laying things out? Horizontally. So what do you think this is going to be? Not a V stack, but H stack. A horizontal stack. And we're going to move from left to right. We're going to move in the writing direction. So in most languages, that's going to be left to right. In some languages, it's going to be right to left. SwiftUI takes care of it all. Okay? So what's the very first thing in our horizontal stack? Our profile picture. And then next thing, we've got some text. We'll go with Arthur Dent. And now, this is kind of interesting. What comes after the username? Space, right? How much space?
Yeah.
We have no idea. The cool thing, though, is that if you just put space in there, it's going to take up as much space as it can. So spacer means whatever, right? And then at the very last thing, we've got this little ellipsis over here. And here's where I'm going to bust out SF symbols. And I'm going to look for ellipsis. Here we go. That is a symbol. So I'm going to say this is an image with a system name of ellipsis. Okay, and let's try previewing this. All right, well this looks pretty good, right? We do want to limit some sizes, right? That image is really big. That's kind of our fault because here in this profile picture we said it'd be 120. If we take that out and go back to our post header, now it's giant because it's trying to take up as much size as it can. What we can do on this H stack is we can say, you know, hey, our frame, there's this modifier on the view's size, and there are a whole bunch of arguments you can provide, and all of them are optional. And they all have default values of nil. What I want to say is I want a max height of like 64, okay? And everything else I'm going to delete. And now, when I say I've got an H stack with a max height of 64, resume, I should get a H stack with a max height of 64. The border is because I'm mousing over it.
No, the red.
Oh, the red border. Yeah.
The border is
Let's just get rid of the border. Boom. Post header. Okay. Way better.
You gotta need padding on the
Padding
front
on
and
the left
back.
and the right. How would you get some in-depth?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's several different ways we can do this. We could say there's padding to the left of profile picture. We could say there's padding to the left of the H stack itself. We could say that there's an empty view there that has an explicit width of whatever pad size we want. There are a whole bunch of different ways to do this.
I would add stack.
Let's put it on the H stack. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here to H stack and I'm going to say dot, what am I doing? Padding. And I want to say for some specific edges, have a specific length of padding. So what are my edges? Leading and trailing. And how much space do I want? 10. Boom. Okay.
You're wrong.
Now I want
With no cigar.
I want this username to be a little bit bigger maybe, or at least bold. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to start describing the text. And I'm going to say I want a font weight of bold. And now that's bold. Okay. With the image, this probably might need to be a little bit bigger. And this is actually kind of weird, is that SF symbols are technically part of a font, right? So if you want to modify the size of an SF symbol, even though you could do something like resizable, and then you get blah, this giant thing. You can also do things like, I want this to have a specific font of, like a title size, right? Whichever you choose is kind of depends on what the effect you're going for is.
I want a static.
Huh?
I want a static size.
Yeah, we could do a font.
Accessibility would grow.
Well, yeah, title means that it would grow with accessibility.
Yeah, I don't know if you want that.
Why not?
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe if it's super big and it's growing with the larger font sizes, that makes it easier to tap,
I
which
don't
is
know if you want it with hard black lines.
right.
Yeah.
I'm gonna leave it as title. But that looks pretty good, right? That looks about like what we got over here. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with this. Now, in the normal Instagram app, this ellipsis is a button. We'll see if we get there. Let's just keep building our post view though. All right, so we got a post header.
Should the post header take the text so
Yeah, we should be passing in some sort of like little view model-y thing that has, the user information, and the user would ideally have, what's the image and what's their username. I'm kind of just hard coding it for right now, because like I could go through making a user struct.
Let's get the layout.
Let's get the layout stuff going first. Okay. So here in our post view, we've got our post header, and we've got our image, and the image is totally dominating. So again, let's say this is resizable, and there we go. That looks nice. And let's also again do the aspect ratio of 1 with a fit, like that. Man, are we sure that's fit? Yeah, it is fit. It just looks weird. Okay. Okay, let's take a look at actions, the action bar. So I'm going to create another little view here. I'm just going to call it post actions. And where is it? Here it is. So there are 4 actions, 4 symbols. What am I making? Yeah, let me just move this over so you can kind of see it. Boom. You tell me. H stack. Image. System name. We'll do something. And then image. System name. Something. Next. Image. System name. Something. Spacer. And then image. System name. Something.
And we also want our padding of 10 to
Yeah.
the H stack padding.
No, but H stack spacing will space the elements in each stack. It's not even make the left.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Let's quickly figure out these ones. I know that this one is heart. Let's see. Let's look for message. Here we go. Message. Or maybe there's like chat. No, bubble. Because with message here, it's got this little I, and you're only allowed to use that symbol if you're referring to iMessage.
Rejected.
Yeah, this is like an average thing. So let's look here at bubble, and we'll go with bubble.write. Bubble.write, and now we need like a little letter or something. Email, share, plain,
Envelope.
envelope.
No, there was. There's paper. We had it. Paper. There it is.
Yeah, paper plane.
There we go.
Paper plane, and then like a ribbon.
It says bookmark.
Bookmark, there you go. Bookmark. Okay, and let's go back here to our post view, and we'll say we need post actions. Okay, resume this. Okay, there they are. Nice and itty bitty and tiny. So let's go back here to post actions, and I'd really like to modify the size of these all at once. So I could just like go put .font, .title on all of them. Is there another way I could do it? Huh? Yeah, what if I put it on the H stack? Because this is basically saying everything inside you should have a title font, right? And I kind of want them, to be spaced further apart. They seem kind of crammed, especially the heart and the chat bubble. So one of the parameters I can pass in as an initializer to an H stack is spacing. And let's give them just a little bit more. Let's say, let's start with 10. Maybe more, 15? 15 looks pretty good.
Quick question.
Yeah,
I noticed the autocomplete didn't include spacing in there.
it did. It was not the first parameter. The first parameter is alignment. So the alignment is like, I've got a bunch of things in the H stack. Do I want them aligned to the top of the stack, the bottom of the stack, first baseline, center? By default, it's center. But here's spacing as a second parameter. And again, vertical alignment has a default parameter, so I don't have to explicitly put it in. Okay, spacing, 15. That looked pretty good. And we'll go back to our post view. This updates. Looks pretty good. I kind of wish the actions were a little bit further underneath the image. So maybe what I want to say is on this V stack, I want some spacing. 10. Maybe that kind of shoves it down. Maybe we'll go to 20. And it looks pretty good. It did move the other one up because the other one is also in the V stack. Right? So at this point, maybe we'd look at making this smaller. We can see there's its border right there versus that border. So, yeah. Okay. Next, what are we looking at? This liked stuff. Let's create a post likes view. And I don't know why that got in there. And what are our post likes? This is basically just text. All right, liked by no one. Post likes. And, resume. No, that was totally the wrong stroke.
What about the parentheses on the file? Post likes last one.
Introduction.
Yeah, and
Okay.
your Swift files has parallels on the left. Post likes.
Here we go. Command option. Here we go. What? Sorry. What about my likes?
So on the file navigator right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can
Oh.
put some yeah.
All right. That's weird. Thank you. That's why I got those weird underscores.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've got here on our post view. We've got this text here, like by no one. It's off in the middle. Why?
Default center?
Right, because our V stack has a default horizontal alignment of center. So we can change it to dot lead, not leader, leading. That might just be alignment. I think it's liked by no one. And it's off to,
You got a pop.
yeah, so what's another way we could have fixed that?
Put a space, or yeah, space after it.
Yeah, we could have put the text in like this H stack with a spacer after that. And then hope that the spacer would like run down to 0 if the text got too long. Definitely an option. I kind of like this alignment version because I think it more accurately describes what I want, which is I want the text off to the left.
Use the whole thing.
And it will just grow to use the whole thing.
Kind of works with other languages.
And it does, well, so with the H stack. H stack will aligns, it lays things out in writing direction, not just left to right. Okay. All right. And then let's save the comments for later. And now let's take a look at a feed view. What is a feed view?
Series of those.
It's like a scrolling list of posts, right? Okay, there are a couple different ways we could do this. The one we could do like a V stack, and this is where things are going to get a little weird. I'm going to just say we want 20 posts. There is a special view called for each, and for each, it looks like a loop, but it's a view, and what it really means is construct my body however many times I've been instructed to. Yeah? So not control flow, but a view. It's like a loop view. Okay, and inside my for each, I want a post view. Ooh, what am I missing here?
Underscore in after curly brace.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Because in this case, the iteration parameter is getting passed in, and I don't care about it, but I have to allow it to be there. Now, if I go look at this, where are my photos?
Yeah, I think that.
Why are they not there?
Also, your profile photos quite small.
Yeah, very small. What's going on?
Not a competitive size specified.
And this does not have a map to minimum height.
No, they
Plus
don't.
you need to define it.
So, a VStack always sizes to fit its content, and it does not scroll. So this means it's trying to fit as much as it can into the screen size,
You did too.
which means it's compressing as much as it can down to nothing. So the images are there, but they have like a height of 0.
Is that based off of some sort of compression resistance, like you would normally see, or like how is it determining, like why isn't some of the other stuff that way?
So the basic layout flow is that a view, a parent view, gets proposed a size. It says like, here's the area you have, you tell me what size you want. And for the root view, that area is the screen size. And a VStack does not like overflowing that size. It can. If we look at this VStack, we'll see that it is extending beyond, but it really tries to not to. So it's getting proposed the size of the screen, and it's doing as much as it can to fit inside that screen. There is a single, simple thing we can do.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
So is it not also proposing a size to the post view, and the post view is choosing to
Okay, so VStack gets size of the screen. Let's just call it 1,000 to make the math easy. It knows that it has 20 children. So it needs, well, it has one child, the for each. So it then proposes the full size to the for each. The for each knows I've got 20 children, so it takes and they all have the same layout priority, okay? So it basically takes that 1,000 and divides it by 20 and says to the first one, can you lay out in 50? And the first one's like, I can try really hard to lay out in about 50. And I think if we were to go dig into this, we would see that it's laying out very close to 50 or to 1/20th of the overall size. But it still has to accommodate the fact that the actions, well, okay, so the image in the post header we said is resizable. That means resizable up and resizable down. And so it can go as small as we want because we did not give it a min height, right? So it is going to the height of the text, right? That is not allowed to shrink because we haven't told it it can. And so that shrinks it down to the minimum. We have to have that 20 or the 20 of spacing in the V stack. The image itself, we said, is also resizable, right? So that we could get the aspect ratio. That's saying, well, there's really not enough space, resize down to 0. And then the rest is basically just the explicit height of whatever it is. So it's basically going as small as it can. But we want it to scroll, right? There's nothing describing that we want it to scroll. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so it's proposing a smaller size, and because of the way that we define the view, describe the view for post view and its subviews,
Yeah.
it says,
Yeah.
I'm fine with this size. We could describe it at post view and say, we're not okay with the smaller size and the compression, and it would basically then override the proposed size from the view.
Correct. How do we think we could describe scrolling? Scroll view, right? Scroll view. And what do we want to scroll? The V stack. Boom. And now, it doesn't really show, oh, here, let's resume this. And now, this, oh, it's spinning. Anyway. Yeah.
That would have been cool.
Yeah. But, okay, here we go. It scrolls, right? And each view is now saying, oh, because what's happening now is the root view is proposing to the scroll view, you've got the height of the screen. And the scroll view says, great, I can take that. The scroll view is then turning around to the V stack and says, you have a width of the screen and a height of infinity, right? How much space do you need? And at this point, the V stack's like, let me tell you how much space I need. And now it's proposing infinity to each of the subviews, and each of the subviews can now resize to their natural size. Okay? So we've got this really cool scrolly experience.
Question.
Yes?
So, especially with an app like Instagram where you could have thousands of potential posts in your feed,
Yeah.
will this VQ them like a table view, or will they
It will
all
not.
be one rate?
It will not. Yeah, so we wouldn't want to use a for each like this. There are other ways to do a for each where you can say, I have an array of objects. And then this is where we start getting into things like observable object and bindings and stuff in SwiftUI. At this point, like we would have a data source that is kind of watching the visible bounds of the scroll view and then updating that array to reflect what should be displayed. And then there's like other things you'd have to do to like manage the scroll position so it doesn't like jump all over the place. Possible, way beyond anything I know how to do. But that's the general idea, is you would have a data source that's far more intelligent than just show 20 posts.
Okay.
You can also use a list.
Yeah, so a list, we could absolutely use a list. Let's put a list in here and we'll show what's going on. It's a little bit different. A list is more like a conventional table view. So when I put this in a list, notice there are a couple things going on. One, I've got some automatic padding going on, because now each dig is in a row, and the row by default has padding. I also have separators between the list items, and I think those are, yeah, these are like table cells at this point.
it took it a lot less time to load. Is that due to the using the list, or is that just?
I think that's just the previous engine.
It is doing DQ.
It's doing DQ also.
Is it?
So
Okay.
it's not actually loading the entire list.
Does it EQ if it's a list with a for each in it, or do you have to do the list of 0 to 20 without a for each in it? Does that make sense?
Great question. So if you do the list of like 0 to 5, would you have 100 items? Because you have the 5, 0 to 24 for eaches? Is I think what you maybe.
I was more wondering if list parentheses 0 to less than 20 is the same as list with a for each inside of it that's 0 to less than 20.
Oh,
That same thread of thought.
what are the initializer parameters? Yeah, so,
That's possible.
yeah, we could do, so the reason you would do a for each like this is so you could also do sections. So I could have a section here, and then another section there, and this section can have a header that is a text of section 1, and this section can have a header that is text section 2, like this. And now notice I've got this header up here, section 1. So this is when I would want to have like actual bodies and for eaches, is if I want like a very specific structure to the list, if it's not just like a homogeneous thing. I could, as you say, just do a list of 0 up to but not including 20 of a post view like this. And it would just be just that. And that would give me the same thing as what we had before. No header, separator lines. So it kind of depends on how your data is structured, whether you want sections or not, etc. You could even do a for each. Let me put this back. What you could do is a for each of a section, and then here, and now we can have like a dynamic number of sections, right? So I got section 1. Why is this not scrolling? I don't know. There we go. Section 1. 1220, section 2, and so on. So you can get some kind of complicated stuff. Now let's say we did decide to go with a list, and we want to modify things like these insets on the post view. This is a modifier. We want to modify this view, so it's going to be a method. And here we want to say when we're in a list, we want insets of 0. If they have a 0, no, just edge insets, empty construction. And now we've got posts that go all the way up to the edges. Because we're saying we're modifying this view such that when it's in a list row, it has these edge row insets. We can modify the list itself to have a list style. So instead of having this plain style, we could have a group list style. And notice that this is like a full-on constructed type that you pass in. So there's like group list style. There's also plain list style. Plain is default. Grouped is this. It's where like the section header does not float, and it's you kind of like more used to what we're used to in settings, for example. So a bunch of the fun little tweaks you can do at this point. Questions?
What about like animations?
Talk to Mark
Like-
Likens.
Could you make the heart tappable when you tap on it, make it solid?
Yeah, that's really cool. Where would we go?
We got the Post.
Post actions, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so if we want to make it tappable,
How would you, yeah.
Change it to a button.
it's a button. Okay, so what we would say, we need this to be a button, and we're going to have an action, and here's what's inside the button. Okay, notice how it changes it to blue because that's like the default style. We need some state to know, should it show an unfilled heart or a filled heart?
Yeah.
Okay, so state var
Probably private.
is favorite, and we'll just say false. Okay, I don't care if it's private or not. Now what happens when we tap the button?
Toggle.
Toggle.
Self.isFavorite.toggle. I'll explain that at state here in a minute. And then what do we choose? We need to like dynamically choose which image we want. So
based on if it's true or false.
self.isFavorite. We'll use the Elvis operator or the ternary isFavorite. We want heart.fill.
Did you call it Elvis?
Elvis. The question mark colon is sometimes called the Elvis operator. So there you go. Now I will say this is only local state, right? There's a state that is not persisted beyond this view. So like if we were to, we navigated away from the screen and came back, would it still have that state? I think so, because SwiftUI is clever, but like we're not saving it to any sort of data store. We need to do a little bit
that
more.
works.
What?
For those of us who are skeptical, can you show us how it works?
Sure. All right, so let's go back to feed view. Okay, let's preview this. Notice we've got a heart that's blue now. I can tap it. Oh, notice I cannot tap it. And this is one of the weird things with SwiftUI, in that I wish it didn't do this, but when it sees a button inside of a list row, it assumes that's what you should do when you tap on the entire row. Okay? Right. So at this point, we need to change it back to a scrolling VStack.
Oh, really? Can't use.
So let's move those over. And I think that's it.
And button we put inside a group, not trigger it.
No. Okay. Scroll view VStack 20 posts. And now, oops. Now I can click on the button. And why is this not working? VStack.
Your fill was inside of the name of the item. Should it be heart and then not fill instead of, oh, okay.
Should be heart.fill.
That shows what I know about.
It's right, debugging.
Can you breakpoint there?
Breakpoint,
And
yeah,
see
see
if it
what
comes
it's
in?
doing. You put breakpoints in the stack.
You have to run it on the simulator.
Yeah.
Oh, you can't.
It does a breakpoint.
Oh, and I need to construct a feed view, of course. Okay, so we're here.
You actually want it on the toggle line.
Okay. There we go. Maybe it is not working right in the previous.
Preview maybe doesn't have the state.
Yeah.
It should, it just may have been.
It might just be a bug in yours or like glitch in yours, because I did the exact same thing you did and it's running my preview then.
Okay.
Oh,
All right, but
sweet.
and notice if you look really closely, it is animated. So what we're doing is we're describing two discrete states here. So let's talk about this at state thing. How many of you have heard of property wrappers? Heath has? Anyone else? Ben? David? Okay, so property wrappers are a new feature in Swift 5. So I can jump to the definition of state here, and I'm going to be taken to this funky little thing. It's a struct called state that's generic to a type, and it's got this special annotation called at property wrapper. And a property wrapper is a type that has a wrapped value. Okay? Now, when we create a state and a view goes on the screen that has a state, SwiftUI says, here's some state I need to watch. And it associates that state with the tree of views underneath it. And if it ever sees that state change, it rebuilds the entire tree of views underneath it. So here, when we are toggling the state, SwiftUI is saying, this state has changed. Therefore, re-invoke body. And then it's got the old body where we had heart, and we've got the new body where we've got heart.fill, and everything else is the same. And it's going to do this quick little diffing algorithm, and it's going to see the only thing that's changed is the image. And it's going to see it went from this image to that image, apply a default animation to automatically interpolate from one state to the other. It is really cool. We can control the animation by describing, for example, that we want this to have an animation. Instead of the default, we want it to have like a spring. I don't even know what that would look like at this level. We're probably not going to be able to see much difference. But we can specify like.
Those are just timers.
Yeah, I mean the animation here is it's describing the timing curve of what's going on, and I think if we want to describe how it changes, we might need the transition, and this was where we could have like maybe dot slide. No, I don't know. Talk to Mark Boykins. But that's basically what's happening, is when it sees the state change, it rebuilds the view, does a quick rundown to see what's different, and then figures out, well, you know, I went from this to that, quick, do like this default animation between the two. And it's very smart about the animation, like, you can even like interrupt animations, like, by default, the timing for animations is about 0.3 seconds. But the state change is instantaneous, right? So if you change the state while it's animating, it doesn't like animate to the end and then animate it back. It just animates it from its current interpolated value, which might be halfway, right? And then it will just animate it back to whatever. So it's very, very smart. And like, if you just think about what would I have to do to get like interruptible animations working on like my custom UI button, like ugh, shoot me now, right? This is super gross stuff. And we get this for free. Okay, so on here we've got some good stuff. Let's talk about navigation really quick. Yeah.
Just fun fact, I was playing around with the list and the button. If instead of doing a button, you do an on-tap gesture on the image,
Yeah.
it does work.
It does work, but you don't get like the visual feedback of the button state changing.
Oh, like press down.
Right, because it's just like putting a tap gesture recognizer on something.
Yeah, that's true.
And you don't have like the depressed state. like if we like click and hold on the button, we'll see how it kind of like does that little alpha change. The on tap gesture does not give us that.
And I imagine you lose your disabled state,
Yeah,
your
that's
enabled state.
Yeah.
Lose all that too.
Do
Do you have a freeze button? Do they have that?
with buttons,
But, you know, like you want a button with a disabled look.
I don't know if button specifically has an enabled state. Yeah, I'm not seeing one. What I would assume is if you wanted a button that was conditionally enabled or disabled, you just would sometimes create a content view with a wrapping button and sometimes without.
Does it not have a dot disabled and you pass in a Boolean?
I wish. Or no, disabled.
Oh, it does. Here we go. Here we go. Disabled.
And you pass in whether it is.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you have to be able to disable these things.
We want it disabled true,
Yeah.
and now it's, there we go. Grayed out. Boom.
Okay, Dave, let's do a media